It's now my pleasure to introduce Susan. Susan is a licensed therapist, owner of Boulder Family Counseling, author, and speaker who specializes in the power of connectedness as the primary safeguard for today's young people. With over 20 years of experience, she helps families build emotional safety that creates heartfelt interactions that protect children in this very increasingly complex world. She's the author of The Parent-Teen Connection. She provides research-backed strategies for creating the parent-child connection and serves as a buffer against mental health challenges, peer pressure, and digital age risk. We were very fortunate to meet Susan at the CADCA conference. Allie, our team member, met Susan there, and we're so grateful that she has become such an important friend of Operation Parent, and I am so thankful to turn the presentation over to her. Welcome, Susan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Operation Parent, for hosting this webinar. I am so excited to be here. Thank you all for attending online. We're just so excited to spend some time with you today. As Michelle mentioned, I've been a therapist for over 20 years, working with preteens, teens, young adults. And when you work with kids, you work with parents and families. And I absolutely love my job. It's such a privilege that people grant me their trust and let me into their world. Also the parent of 3 kids, 27, 22, and 12. So not only parenting in 2 decades, across 2 decades, but also in my office for over 20 years. So I really have seen how the landscape has changed, what our kids are facing, and then that means that us as parents have to pivot in what we're doing as well. I would say my greatest joy is that my kids can come to me when they're struggling with something small, with something big, and I am a safe landing place for them. I would say that's my biggest joy of parenting. And I'm also the author of The Parent-Teen Connection, How to Build Lifelong Family Relationships. Over 20 years, I've seen the same negative cycles, patterns of interaction that cause disconnection between children and their parents. And I've seen what works, what tools, what strategies that I've used in my office and at home to build stronger connections. And so I wanted to reach more people, so I put those tools and strategies in a book. And today we will be giving away a few books. I think three books today. I want to tell you a story that touched my heart, a very brief story about a family. And it really speaks to the deep need that our kids have to feel emotionally close to their parents. About 4 years ago, I received a call from a mother, and immediately I could hear the panic in her voice. And she called to talk to me about her daughter, Ella, who was 12 at the time. She began to describe significant changes in Ella's behavior. She wasn't eating much at mealtime, not wanting to participate in extracurricular activities or have her friends over after school. She was isolating in her room and doom scrolling on her phone. And her husband asked Ella what was wrong. And while she wouldn't share with them what was happening, she asked to see a therapist. And I met Ella around 4 days later. And Ella began to describe that every day felt like a struggle for her. She was having difficulty navigating her social world, feeling pressure at school. And at times she said she felt hopeless. And then she said, and I wish things were different at home. And when I asked her what different would look like, she told me that she wished she could share with her parents how she was doing, that she could talk to them about how she's feeling. She said, we just don't do that at home. In fact, it feels like it's all business. We talk a lot about school and chores and what I need to get done, but we're not talking about how I'm really doing. I wish I could be more emotionally close with my parents. So I asked Ella, can we share this with your parents? I want to help you build closer connection at home so you can talk to them about how you're doing. And she said yes, but she said that she didn't want to be in the room when I shared that with her parents. And when kids respond that way, it means I actually don't know how I can talk to my parents about this. It feels that big to them. So I called Ella's parents, her mother came in, and I explained to her that Ella actually does want to talk to you about how she's feeling, what's going on in her life. In fact, she actually said she wants to feel more emotionally close to you. And I could see Ella's mom taking in what she said. And she paused and she said, I don't know how to do that. I didn't grow up in a family where we talked about how we were feeling. I felt for Ella's mom, and Ella's mom's experience is very similar to a lot of people that I work with and just in the general public. Parenting has changed. And we as parents, again, need to pivot. Connection is at the heart of being human, and that bond, that attachment between a parent and child is the most important attachment that they're going to have. It really sets the foundation for them for a lifetime. And it actually feels very natural for a child to want to reach for a parent in times of distress, to answer all sorts of questions, to ask for reassurance and comfort. But if we're not preparing the groundwork for trust and open communication, those attempts where our kids are trying to connect with us can be met with hesitation and fear, which means our kids are sitting by themselves with difficult feelings, maybe feeling overwhelmed or confused, and sometimes even frightened. And then over time, this can lead to loneliness, withdrawal, behaviors that might even seem like rebellion from our young people, and all of which create disconnection and sometimes even conflict between parent and child. But what if I told you all today that one word, just one word, could help you build a trusting relationship with your child that brings real closeness? That if you kept this word in mind when you're interacting with your kid, you would feel more ease in the relationship, see positive shifts in their behavior, experience less conflict and more harmony at home, and that you wouldn't have to play the guessing game to find out what's going on with your child, like Sally had to. Everything I'm going to share with you today leads you back to this one word, connectedness. Now, I know that we are hyper connected right now through digital platforms, social media, texting, email, but I'm talking about something different. Connectedness is that feeling of closeness with another where we really feel valued and cared for. There's an internal warmth and responsiveness in the relationship that feels safe and reassuring. It's actually that feeling behind a secure attachment. And this is what Ella was talking about when she said she wanted to feel emotionally close with her parents. She was struggling. She wanted to reach out for them, but it didn't feel safe to do so. So today I'm going to share with you a brief overview of what you can find in the Parenting Connection that protects our kids. It protects their mental health. It helps them with peer pressure and the digital age risks that we are seeing right now in abundance. I'll share strategies on building that emotional closeness, fostering belonging, and building safety. And I'll also share barriers that prevent that connection to happen. First, I think it's really important for us to look at what the source was of Ella's stress and what most kids are facing today. And as I mentioned, the landscape for our kids has changed. I hear the word pressure a lot in my office. There's academic pressure, and that can be self-induced, peer-to-peer pressure, and parents can also unintentionally create pressure for their kids. There can be a lot of misunderstandings and assumptions about what kids have, what they think their parents' expectations are. And of course, our kids want to please us as parents. So it's really important to talk with your kids to avoid any assumptions of what they think you're expecting from them. We also have to remember that balance is key. We want to challenge our kids, but we don't want to challenge them so much that it spills into distress. So we have to find that sweet spot with each of our kids of that academic level that they need. A 4.0 used to be great, and now a 4.0 can actually close doors to certain colleges. And so that is very hard for parents and young people to understand and deal with. And then we're looking at extracurricular activities. My oldest is 27. And if I even look at what her experience was playing the top level of soccer team a decade ago, it is vastly different as far as what the time commitment is and the level of training. I feel like it's almost double across the board in all sports, even in acting, those and musicals. Their kids are practicing hours upon hours, which also cuts into family time, which we'll talk about. Social media is also something that's bringing a tremendous amount of stress to our teenagers. They get stuck in that comparison trap. When we think about it, and I'm dating myself, but I'm 55, my comparison pool was who I went to high school with and in my neighborhood. Now our children's comparison pool is the world and people of all different ages. And that can be very difficult for a young person to take in. I talk about it as a moving bar. Once they feel that they've accomplished something and reached a challenge that they wanted, the bar moves. And so it gives them less of an opportunity to take in those accomplishments, which is so important because young people are at a time where they're building their sense of self and self-worth. We also have to remember that all of that is layers of stress that are on top of the normal challenges that adolescents and young people go through of emotional and physical changes. And then one thing that is also important to remember is that stress can feel very different to a young person than to an adult. And that's because the region of the brain that helps with problem solving, organizing, and impulse control matures later than the part of the brain that processes emotions like fear and anxiety. So what we as adults may not see as stressful, our children feel that stress. So again, lots of pressure, and a lot of children also sharing that they don't feel like they have a safe space to share, to talk about that pressure, to talk about how they're feeling. A lot of children tell me that they hold back, not sharing with their parents because they see how busy their parents are. They don't want to stress them out, or they don't want to burden them. And so that means that kids have a tremendous amount of pressure and don't know where to turn. They feel very unsure. And, it feels very natural for a child to want to turn to their parents because parents are their primary attachment figure. We have such an incredible ability to impact our kids about how they express their feelings, how they manage their emotions, and how they handle stress. And how we interact with them actually affects their self-esteem and their confidence to initiate and explore new opportunities. And we as parents also have an incredible ability to co-regulate our children, and I'll talk about that more today. There's another reason why I'm talking about this word connectedness. It's because it's a protective factor. It's not just what Ella asked for and other kids share with me in session, but it's something that can truly change their lives. Connectedness is a protective factor, and research backs this. Family remains the central influence in our kids' lives, and connectedness with at least one parent results in better school performance, fewer emotional problems, less conduct disorders, higher self-esteem, less likely to use substances, less violence, and fewer suicide attempts. It may not always seem like it. Believe me, I know I'm a parent that we are the central influence in our kids' lives, but we are. So it's very, very important to build that connection. So how do we build that connection? For Ella's mom, I drew this graphic. Building trust, which is foundational in any relationship, creating a sense of belonging. Effective communication, which also means communicating with empathy. And to accomplish all of those elements, we have to self-reflect as parents. And so together, these elements, belonging, communication, self-reflection, build trust that provides security and understanding in the relationship. And this is what allows that openness and that ability for our kids to be transparent with us. And when we can be transparent in our relationships, really any of our relationships, we feel emotionally closer, creating that sense of connectedness. I want to just tell you a very brief story that when I was a young parent of two, my kids were, I think, about 2 and 6. It finally dawned on me that I was trying to make everything perfect for them. I wanted every experience to be great and wonderful. I didn't want them to experience hard feelings. I wanted every moment to be happy. But in doing that, I realized I had become a helicopter parent, a snowplow parent. I realized my need to make everything perfect was actually backfiring. I could be rigid at times, and actually I was anxious. And so my kids felt that, which also meant that they couldn't relax and experience joy with me because they in turn became anxious. So with everything I'm going to share with you today, I just want to make sure that you don't think you have to be a perfect parent, that there's no such thing, that connection is what is important. So building trust. Again, building trust is foundational in any relationship, so it shouldn't be different with our kids. And we are our kids' first relationship. We are their first experience trusting another human being. It's a big responsibility. So how do we build trust in the early years? And I'm sure you've all been told that we are supposed to bond with our babies. And we do that through what we call a serve return, a volley. The baby cries, they serve up a need, the parent responds with rocking, cuddling, feeding, changing a diaper. And that serve return over time creates a secure attachment. The baby says, my parent is right here with me. I feel safe and I feel connected to my parent. So as our kids get older, we create that secure attachment. It just looks different. It's less labor intensive and more of an emotional connection. And so part of any healthy relationship is building trust, as I mentioned, and that starts with belonging. And we all, as humans, possess the need to belong, to feel like we're accepted, that we matter, that we're a part of something bigger than ourselves. But it might surprise you to hear that being a part of a family doesn't necessarily give a child the sense of belonging. Belonging is something that you actually have to intentionally cultivate at home. And research shows that kids that feel a strong sense of belonging at home are better equipped to find and seek belonging outside the home. So belonging at its core is acceptance. Kids need to know that they're accepted for who they are and even for who they are not. Acceptance when they mess up or when they fail. Our kids can be very unsure, especially navigating their social world, of where they fit. And so they need to know that they fit at home, that they're liked for who they are at home. For years, I've done an exercise with young people in my office, and I have parents write a letter to their child about what do you think of them, about who they are. And I read that letter in session to my clients. And the response is always the same. I had no idea they thought that way about me, or they felt that way about me. It is one of the most powerful exercises I do. So it is very important for our kids to know how we see them and how we feel about them. Because the truth is our child's self-talk, that narrative that they carry with them into adulthood, is deeply shaped about how they believe that we see them. And so we can't rely on them assuming and making assumptions. We have to communicate that clearly to them. It's really, really important. So again, not just I love you, but also I like you and why I like you for who you are. Part of acceptance is also allowing our kids to explore. And somehow we adults are now, for years, have termed this as rebellion, when they explore and discover themselves and risk take. And really, they're individuating and differentiating. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I'm really trying to get people to understand that rebellion, actually using that word when we describe teenagers, actually doesn't do us any good, because it is tied to a lot of assumptions that are negative, when actually they're in a developmental stage that they're supposed to be in, and they're supposed to be exploring, initiating, and doing some risk taking. Sometimes it is really hard for us to see what our kids are exploring and trying, whether that's the clothes they wear or their interest. For example, they want arts and we see them or want them to be doing sports. So I think when we look at acceptance, we also have to do some self-reflection of, am I uncomfortable that they're making these choices because it's not something that I like or I would want them to do? Or is it something that's outside of my value set and our family's value set? So that's really important to visit, to self-reflect about. Another way to cultivate belonging is through what I call the mom-dad versus the parent role. It's about being mindful of the interactions that you have with your kids every day. So for years, I've been asking young people, what % of interaction do you perceive as positive with your parent? Most say around 30%. And when I ask them, what makes up that 30%? They say things like, we went for a walk, we cuddled on the couch and watched a movie, we cooked together, we danced, we listened to music, we went skiing. All of those times where you're experiencing joy with your child, those are the moments you're cultivating the relationship with your child. And that is what I term the mom-dad role. And then I ask kids, well, what makes up that other 70% that you perceive as negative? And they describe all the interactions that begin with, have you, when are you going to, and you need to. And that's what I term the parent role. Now, we do have to do those instructional type of tasks, keeping our kids on track, making sure they're doing chores and homework, because that is good for them. And that is part of our role as a parent. But when we are only in that parent role, we're not cultivating the relationship. It can actually feel more like a performance review rather than a relationship. So we really need to do our best to flip that to where we are spending less time in that instructional parent role and more time in the mom-dad caregiver role. This is something that you can implement tomorrow, and I promise you, you will see differences in your relationship with your child if you focus just even on this one strategy that I'm giving you today. I promise. The other thing that really helps create belonging is collaboration. You know, we all have had that boss that micromanages us, tells us what to do. It makes us feel small. But when they give us a voice, we feel empowered. We feel like we matter, like that we're in this together with them. And so collaborating with our kids is very, very important about rules and boundaries and all of that. So I promise if you're cultivating more of that mom-dad time, you're going to spend less time in that parent role. And that's because closeness brings cooperation, I promise. So there are also barriers to belonging that create disconnection. And I'm going to talk to you about a few. Some of the common ones are judgment, criticism, shaming. I want you to think all of those as pushing your child away. You're actually creating disconnection when you shame, criticize, and judge them. And, you know, sometimes we as parents don't hear it. We don't hear that something that we're saying sounds critical, but they do. And that's what matters. And so with my own kids, I just say, if it lands critical with you, just tell me. I can own that. I can repair it. And my intention is never to hurt your feelings. So I'm happy to apologize and move on. Certain behaviors, bullying, slights, insults, teasing, sarcasm, and name calling may feel harmless, but they can really deeply wound our kids unless we really check in with them and repair. Yelling is a very common one. Yelling can feel chaotic to a child. I have many kids in my practice that talk about yelling, whether that is yelling at them or parents yelling at each other, that they avoid being at home or they isolate in their room because it just feels very chaotic and disorganized. And it's hard for them to even concentrate. And oftentimes what happens is when teenagers hit the teen years, then they begin yelling back and then they get called disrespectful. So I know it's hard not to yell, but there's tools in the book about how to. I actually give a case study of a parent that I helped stop yelling. Physical aggression, we used to be parented by fear. I mean, that was my experience, and not any fault of my own parents. It's just the way parenting was then. But really, like looking back now, that why would we want our children to fear the closest person to them, the one they're supposed to feel comforted by and secure with? And so that parenting by fear is an outdated version of parenting. So whether verbal or nonverbal, these forms of aggression really tell a child that they don't belong. And we want our kids to feel like they belong at home. So a really helpful question is to ask yourself, what is the relational climate at home? And that is parent to child, parent to parent, and sibling to sibling. What does the atmosphere feel like? Is there tension? Is there stress? Does it feel like you're walking on eggshells? Or is it calm and relaxing? And how are we treating each other? Do our daily interactions, both verbal and nonverbal, communicate you're accepted, you're respected, you matter, and you belong here? Okay, so communication. That is the second element. Communication is really about creating understanding. And it is one way that we build a secure attachment and that feeling of connectedness. I want to tell a brief story. One day, my son was 10, he's 22 now, and I was standing at the kitchen sink. And he comes over to me and he says, "Mom, are you mad at me?" And I turned and I looked at him and I'm like, why do you think that I'm upset with you? Because we have this look on your face, and I just assumed it was about me and I was in trouble. And I said, "I'm no way mad at you. I'm very overwhelmed. I'm actually going through my to-do list in my head. And I guess when I'm anxious, I look angry." And he gave me a hug. So we are constantly communicating, not just verbally, and we'll get to that, constantly communicating and sending messages to our kids. And kids are egocentric, so they think things revolve around them or about them. That's just where they are developmentally. And oftentimes it has nothing to do with them. That day at the kitchen sink, I was so overwhelmed because I had a 14-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an infant. I was anxious. And so it is so important that we check in with our kids or have this open communication where they can ask us, like my son did. I mean, you can imagine how that could have spiraled for him, gone in his room, thought he was in trouble, and where he could have ended up if he hadn't just reached out to me and asked me. So communication is complex. And, you know, one of the biggest things when families come to my office is that they say we need better communication skills. And they're right, because there's a lot that has to go on with communicating. We're constantly sending messages back and forth. But if you can think about it this way, the goal is for you to let the other person know what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and what your experience is. So with those questions in mind, you need to pause and ask yourself, was the message I was sending to them the one that they actually received? Like, do those two things match? And again, we're trying to create understanding when we're talking about communication. I love this slide because it really gives us a good overview of the ways that we communicate. Nonverbal is about 55%. That's our body language, posture, facial expressions, eye gesture, and touch. Paraverbals, around 38%. And this is huge. I would say this is number one where people get disconnected, where the cycle really starts sometimes. And I'm going to talk about the cycle. And people go in opposite directions or a conflict starts. It's tone, pitch, volume, pacing of voice, and verbal. Verbal is about 7%. And so really this is about really looking at, it's not just what is said, it's how it is said. That is really important attention to. So just as I talked about that serve return with your infant to create that secure pond, now I'm going to talk to you about that serve return with your young child, adolescent, preteen, young adult, heck, your relationships with anybody. We all need to learn how to volley. And so the first step is listening. When we lead with curiosity to gain an understanding, things go much different. Confirming messages received until you both have clarity. I want you all to keep this in mind. I hear you say blank. Is that right? That clears up so many misunderstandings and assumptions if you can just repeat that sentence to the other person when you're volleying back and forth. empathizing and validating each other's perspective, even if you don't agree. There are so many times where our young children are sad, upset, stressed, and we don't see it. We don't understand why. Or again, that wouldn't stress us out, that wouldn't make us sad. But the fact is that we all have been sad. We've all been stressed and overwhelmed. And so just empathize with the sadness that they have, even if you don't feel like, heck, I wouldn't be sad for that same reason. Owning and repairing when feelings are hurt or there's mistakes. And this means parents too. Oftentimes, parents don't say, I'm sorry. They don't own their part. And a lot of that is because we feel as parents that we're going to lose power or lose respect if we say, I'm sorry. But I promise you, I hear it in my office all the time. Kids actually lose respect for a parent when they won't just own their part of it and say, I'm sorry. And so it is just so important to be able to do that, because we're also, this volleying that I'm talking about right now, when we take that initiative with our kids, we're modeling. And then they will end up doing it the same way with us and in their other relationships as well. All right. Now, 2 important things when you're volleying with your kids is number 1, slowing down. And when we slow down, and I know it can be hard, it keeps the communication thoughtful instead of reactive. And then the second one is staying regulated. Parents staying regulated will help your child stay regulated. If you can think of it as you're an anchor for them, you are one that can actually co-regulate them. If you're regulated, they will eventually come down, because once you also allow them to express how they're feeling and get that out, it actually helps them process their feelings, and it will end up feeling less chaotic inside. We just think about it. I'm sure you have all had that experience when you're carrying something inside and then you actually finally were able to tell a friend or something. It just felt less big, less heavy, less overwhelming. And so in that volley, you're allowing them to express their feelings, and that will in and itself help co-regulate. It'll help build connection, and it will also help de-escalate conflict and keep you connected even during tense moments. Okay, so some barriers that create disconnection. Not listening. It's got to be number 1, and I would say not just between parent and child, but between adults. Listening is a skill that we all need, and it's the number 1 barrier that I hear. No one's listening. Jumping to problem solving, which is also a factor in why we're not listening, and I'll explain. Parents, we see our kids suffer, and we want to fix it. We feel pain too, right? We hurt when we see our kid hurting. And so we jump to problem solving because we want to make it better. But I want you all to think about jumping into their emotional experience rather than jumping to problem solving. That is what they need. In fact, all of us want somebody just to hear us. They don't want us to tell them what to do. The other thing is when we jump to problem solving, we're actually overloading them with advice and to-dos, and that can just make them feel more overwhelmed, and they're likely to shut down. It's like you feeling overwhelmed with your to-do list and then somebody handing you more to-dos. Other things that cause disconnection is criticism. This often happens when we get dysregulated. These other barriers show up: criticism, judgment, name calling, and all of those just shut down honest sharing, avoiding or stonewalling. That leaves the other person unheard. And so oftentimes when we are like out of options, we just don't know what to do as parents, then we can kind of get dysregulated and jump to these other things that create barriers for listening and being connected with our kids. Okay, the second conversation. So when I worked with Ella and her family, I noticed a lot of miscommunication, a lack of communication that was creating assumptions and misunderstandings. And like many families, when they sat down here and we had an exchange where they were talking back and forth with each other, the conversation quickly spiraled. And I'm sure you can all relate to this, but the sentence that came out is, "That's not what I said. That's not what I said. That's not how it happened." And so pretty soon they were stuck in a negative cycle of interaction. And so I asked them to repeat the words that they heard the other person say. So let's just take Sally. I said, "What did you hear your daughter say?" And she said some of what Ella had shared and a lot of what Ella hadn't even said. And what she shared was what I call the second conversation. And that's the conversation that's going on in our head. It's about how we think and feel about ourselves and what we think the other person thinks and feels about us. And so for Sally, she was telling herself, "I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a good parent. And I'm the bad guy." And none of that was what Ella was saying in that exchange. And for Ella, she was telling herself, her second conversation was, "I'm a bother. My mom thinks I'm dramatic and rebellious." So both of them were filtering whatever the other person was saying through these beliefs, even though they were not spoken out loud. And in fact, they weren't even acknowledged until they were in my room. And so communication isn't just about words, it's about meaning, assumptions, and the internal stories that we're telling in ourselves. And I just think that we don't talk about that part when we're talking about communication enough. And so I've termed that the second conversation. So recognizing our tendencies and what that conversation is in our own heads is that first step to helping your own communication with your young person. And again, really anybody. Another source of disconnection, I couldn't let today go without having at least one slide about technology because it's so embedded in our lives. And I don't know if you all know, remember when the pediatrician recommended 1 to 2 hours of screen time for kids ages 2 to 18. But I remember right now, kids are spending 8 to 18 hours on their screens. Ages 8 to 18 on their screens are on an average of 4 to 8 hours a day. And a poll in 2024 indicated that 60% of parents spend more time on their devices than their kids. So phone screens can unintentionally create disconnection and distance at home. Technoference is a real thing. It interferes with face-to-face interaction, reduces family time, eye contact. Our kids cannot feel like they're a priority. They feel like the screen is a priority over them. And then in turn, they default to their own screens. So technoference impacts bonding, weakens that emotional closeness and the quality of the relationship. There's lost skill building. We're not volleying if we're staring at our screens. And kids need practice. They need practice communicating, listening, working through disagreements and conflict. And they also need the practice of the skill of empathy. Some kids and some people are more empathetic than others, but we all need to practice that skill of empathy. Right now, kids are using their phones to avoid, to cope. They aren't reaching for their parent, they're reaching for a phone and scrolling. They escape their feelings rather than processing them and sitting and learning to manage their emotions. The other thing that I think that we are missing is that when kids are using screens so much. They have less interactions with their parent. They're not asking their parent questions. They're Googling the questions. And so parents are actually missing these normal conversations that are really important, like milestone conversations, asking really important questions. Our kids know that they spend way too much time on their phones already. And so it's really about giving them an alternative. And one of them is connecting with you, spending time with you. Also asking, like, did you move your body today? Did you spend in time person with your friends? Having free phone times at home, the dinner table. We're losing time at the dinner table, and having dinner with your kids is a protective factor, and that builds connection. So we need to be having time at the dinner table with our kids. And then, of course, plugging the phones in the parents' room or the kitchen. And so we are not only modeling phone use, but we're modeling everything constantly for our kids. It's called observational learning. We are modeling the topics that it's okay to talk about, what emotions are okay to express, how we express them, how we handle life stressors, and how we cope. And handling disagreements. It may not always feel like it, but our kids are following our lead. And so that leads me to another favorite slide of mine, self-reflection. In any relationship, it's so important that we self-reflect. It actually tells the other person that we care about them when we're willing to look at ourselves. And so it's no different with our kids. And we only know what we know, which is our experience, unless we self-reflect and try to do things differently. I always say awareness creates choice. And so Sally shared with me that her childhood lacked warmth and emotional closeness. So it's no surprise that Ella was having a similar experience. And so everything on this slide is an indicator of what might be impacting you and your parenting. From parenting styles to communication styles, subjects we talk about, how we cultivate belonging, emotional connection, is really what we get a lot from our family of origin. And I think I shared, I didn't grow up talking about my feelings. And so that was something that I wanted to do differently with my own children. And I was also raised by parenting by fear as well, which was also something that I wanted to do differently. So right now, I encourage all of you to answer these two questions, and you can put some in the chat and we can mention them later or not. Again, it's all anonymous, but what's one thing from your childhood you want to carry forward as a parent? And what is one thing you would like to do differently with your kids? So just take a moment and jot those down.
Great job, Susan. So I'm looking at the chat here to see. Carry forward family game nights.
Yay, I love that.
Mm-hmm. We always had dinner as a family, more hugs, family gatherings and traditions, not parent with fear, not parent with fear. Carry forward my mom's warmness and connection, the feeling of support and love, weekly dinners, family dinners with no phones, music to my ears, holiday traditions, loving affection, yearly vacations, carrying forward pizza, picnic, movie nights, the high-low at dinner, open talk about hard topics. Yes, yes. More family outings, spending more quality time, more talk, less openness, more openness, sorry. Create more communication time, They're coming in so fast. I'm sorry, you guys, I can't read them all, but these are amazing.
Love it.
Yes.
These are
Dinners,
wonderful.
get cooking, carry forward, passing on skills from my father, family dinners, more traditions. Unlike my parents, I want to be more encouraging. List differently. I want to listen more and not interject. I want to improve listening skills. What I want to do different is get rid of command, perform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Respond versus react. Explain more instead of I just said so. No fear-based parenting. Oh, the audience is on it today. Susan, they're really inspired by what you've taught us so far.
Thank you.
We did have an important question in the chat already that I'd like for you to address. And it was from a parent who has young children.
Okay.
And they were asking, how do you create this environment when they're younger than 10, and need help with developing their listening skills?
It's a great question. And I know the title of the book is The Parent-Teen Connection. But the sooner that you read it, the better. And everything I'm talking about today does apply for younger children, 10. And when we are talking about preteen is 9 now. I mean, things have really shifted. It is about creating that space where you put down the phone and really dedicate that time to connect with your kids. You can also gamify it in some way where there's a jar and you each put in the things that you want to do. You each put 10 things in, and on different days you pull one out, and it could be anybody's, right, that had put in the jar. Things like that to make it more fun. One thing I remember that I would do when my kids were younger, where I would be the assistant chef and they would be the chef, and they would find the recipe that they wanted to cook. They would make the mess. They would do whatever they want. And I would just be their assistant. And it was building memories. It was a beautiful thing. They remember that. I remember that. And putting music on is always good.
Mm-hmm. That is so fun. So fun. Another parent asked about her teen is on the autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And so she feels like she has to stay in parent mode most of the time. And she'd like your advice on getting into the mom mode a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think in these sorts of scenarios, because I know there's a big spectrum as far as where different kids are on that autism spectrum, but getting help from a professional, because sometimes getting outside help to help those kids stay regulated, because I know sometimes it can be hard to keep them regulated, and sometimes they can be rigid and not want to try new things. And so you might need a little support in helping those parts. But again, I would tee it up to them. Kids like to have a voice. They want to collaborate. It makes them feel important. But maybe even that same jar idea where they put in some choices about times that you can spend creating joy together. And that's cultivating that mom-dad caregiver relationship.
Oh, that's awesome advice, Susan. Thanks for taking those questions early, but they seemed very important and they were in on the front end of your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So there we go. I'm sorry. I'm getting my screen back. There we go. All right. We were just talking about family of origin, and that largely impacts your cycle of response. And right now you are impacting your own child's cycle of response. So the patterns that you grew up with, the way you see and interpret, react to people and situations. With every client I see, whether I'm seeing somebody individually as a family or with a couple, I will go through this cycle of response with them, and it is in the book. It's so important, again, because awareness creates choice. So I want everyone to think of a recent difficult interaction that you had with your child, your teen, or even of your spouse, if you want to, as I go through this cycle together. And so a trigger. And a lot of people don't like that word trigger. You can use an activating event or an activating stimulus, whether that's verbal, nonverbal, paraverbal. And then what happens next is actually we have a physiological response, body sensations. That's the initial thing that happens. And I'll just share my own. I actually get tightness in my chest when I get activated. And I like to use the word activated. And then action tendency. And I'm sure you have all heard of the flight, fight, freeze response. Now there is a new one. It's called fawning, where we please in the sight of a threat. And then thoughts. And this is that second conversation. The meaning making, view of self, assumptions of the other person, and feelings. Oftentimes, we are showing anger, but we have to understand that anger is a secondary emotion. There's so many other emotions underneath that anger. And so it's really important to be curious of what's underneath the anger. And I promise, if we find out what that is, and let's just say embarrassment, when we deliver that feeling to the other person, I'm actually embarrassed, versus anger, it will be received by the other person much better. And then defenses. We all do things, we all have actions we do to protect ourselves during uncomfortable feelings and situations when we perceive a threat. And so I want to just share, knowing those first two steps of the cycle, the activating event and the physiological response. Right here is where you need to pause. This is where, if you get good at it, where you're like, okay, I know what happens when I get triggered. I know what happens in my body. And that is the moment that I need to take a minute. And you can even verbalize it out loud. I feel overwhelmed right now. I just need a minute. I think I need a couple of minutes. I think this conversation would go much better. My chest feels really tight. I just got activated. The more that we can do that out loud, we are not only regulating ourselves, modeling for our children, and de-escalating what could have happened. And so this is so important for our kids to do and to watch us do, The other piece of this is you can help your kids use the same language. For example, I saw you rolled your eyes. Can you tell me what's going on? As opposed to they're rolling their eyes and then you start yelling and then everything gets very dysregulated. So again, so important for us to model for our kids. And so if we looked at what was happening for Sally, mom, and then Ella going through this cycle of response. So when Ella looked sad, that's when mom got triggered. Her chest got tight and she wanted to fight. And she was telling herself, I don't know what I'm doing. She was showing that she was angry, but she was actually embarrassed and sad. And then her defense is she would criticize and shut down the conversation. And so for Ella, when mom sighed, her throat would get tight. She would want to leave and isolate in her room. She would say to herself, I'm a bother to my mother, when actually she felt sad and disappointed that she couldn't just talk to her mom. And she withdrew and stonewalled her mom and isolated in her room. So again, awareness creates choice. It takes some work and some time, and you just need to be patient with yourself when kind of working through that cycle of response. And so as we're beginning to make changes to our own cycle of response, it requires openness, willing to share, and that brings me to the topic of vulnerability. And I love this topic. We tend to think about the word vulnerability when we're talking about expressing our thoughts and feelings and sharing our needs openly. That we must feel vulnerable to create closeness in our relationships. But my experience has taught me something different, not only in my own home, but working with families and couples for over 20 years. We need to look at vulnerability as a stepping stone to what the goal is, which is emotional transparency. That's what creates real, safe, loving relationships. And I'll explain why. Vulnerability actually means risk and uncertainty. When we feel vulnerable, we are unsure of how the other person is going to react. We might fear rejection or judgment or, gosh, are they going to accept me? Do they want to hear this? That kind of thing. In new relationships, we could almost feel vulnerable all the time, right? Because it's a new person. But the parent-child relationship isn't new. And so that's why we need to really look at vulnerability as a stepping stone. When we sense our kids are hesitating, that is a time we lean in and reassure, yes, this is another topic you can talk to me about. I can hear that. I'm approachable. And over time, the more that you do that, the more that you reassure them, less vulnerability happens. And then they are just transparent. It just feels natural to share with their parent what's going on for them. Okay. And so connectedness and transparency is a positive feedback loop. The more a child feels connectedness, the more they can be transparent. And the more they can be transparent, the more they feel connectedness with you. So it's a positive feedback loop. All right. Even the smallest shifts in your relationship with your child, if you keep that word connectedness in mind, can just transform your relationship with your child. Connectedness also paves the way for cooperation. It makes sense when kids feel seen and heard in their relationship with you. They're more likely to follow responsibilities, not because they're afraid of you, but because they respect you and they trust you. They're going to be more open to your guidance because they don't feel judged or dismissed by you. And they'll feel your care and understanding because you're giving them a voice, that you're wanting to collaborate with them. And so, again, that goal is we want them to share more with us instead of hiding or withdrawing. And so the more that we can move forward in our interactions with that word connectedness in mind, the less our kids are going to hide, withdraw, and keep things from us. Okay. So I wanted to share that I absolutely love my job, and I think I shared that in the beginning. And I do, I listen to clients, obviously, and my listening and empathizing with them does bring reassurance and comfort to them. But we as parents can do that with our own child. It brings them even greater comfort and reassurance, and that's because of that powerful parent-child bond, parent-child bond, caregiver bond. And it may not always seem like it, but that closeness with you is so important. And really, if we think about it, no matter what age, that connectedness feeling with our parent feels like no other. It feels really great. So in kind of closing here, showing what healthy connection looks like through supportive relationships. Here, this is the slide I wanted to get to. So I want to invite you to pause and ask yourself, how are you creating a sense of safety with your kids? Are you showing up in that mom, dad, caregiver role? Are you approachable? Are you volleying with your kids? Are you listening? Can you put yourself in your kid's shoes and imagine what their experience is in their relationship with you? We don't ever really ask that question to the people that we're in close relationships with. What's your experience in your relationship with me? It's a great question. And so actually, I encourage you to ask your kids. For teenagers, you can say, what's your experience in your relationship with me? For younger kids, you could say, what do you like about our relationship? What do you wish were different? And when you do ask that with genuine curiosity and care, those simple questions can open the door to stronger and deeper connection. But you do have to be willing to truly hear their answer. So when we're talking about connectedness, what can we do at schools? Schools should also be working to create an environment where students feel connectedness, where they have a real sense of belonging, and that includes everyone in the building, that they all are welcoming of the students there. Creating structure and programming to promote connection on school campuses, advisory, mentorship programs, creating programming where every student feels like they have a voice and a place. It's so important. And communities. Right now, disconnection is a public health crisis. We are in a loneliness epidemic. And we know that youth connectedness reduces violence, substance abuse, mental health, community-wide. And so we need to look at how we can create connectedness within our communities and really what are those barriers for neighborhoods and families to build that connection. The one thing that the local school district did here, because I'm in Boulder, Colorado, is they purchased 100 books and gave them away to the community, to parents in the community. And we established 15 book groups. And I popped in on each one of those book groups. And what we realized is that, yes, parents gained the practical tools, but they also built community at the same time. It was amazing. And I think what happens is when our kids are little, there is kind of a built-in community. We see parents at the playground or pickup, drop-off. We attend maybe more school or daycare events. And as our kids hit middle school and high school, that community goes away. And so parents of preteen and teenagers can tend to feel a little bit more isolated. So these book groups was a great way to build community. And so here are some national organizations: American Academy of Pediatrics. I want to highlight NAMI, and then I'm going to let Michelle talk a little bit. NAMI has some incredible classes, and they're nationwide. And so I really encourage you all to visit their website.
Yeah, I was just going to also share American Academy of Pediatrics. We utilize their resources so often, and we just had the opportunity to be at the national conference not too long ago. So I know we've got folks on the call that we had a chance to meet there in person at that conference. So that's wonderful. And then I want to let the audience know now is your perfect time to submit your questions. So if you don't have a question in the queue yet and you'd like to, please do that. So just submit that in the private chat, which you guys have already shown you know how to utilize very well. We had great participation earlier in the exercise, which we are so thankful for that connection with you. Susan's book is wonderful. I've had the opportunity to read it personally. As I was reading it, I could not put it down. There's so many things for you to think about your own relationship with your child and taking yourself through the circle of your interaction with them and just thinking about the places where you might get stuck or tripped up and improving those, and then just creating that atmosphere. Like you've taught us so many different ways to just be there. We don't have to be doing things. We don't have to be asking a lot of questions. We just need to be ourselves and let them be themselves. And the book was just such a powerful tool for me as a parent of older college age kids to think about that new relationship and what that looks like and how you do that as they're older. But then thinking about all the folks on the call can utilize simple shifts just to make that relationship so much more warm and connecting. And it's the most important thing that we do. So I really encourage you to take the time to check out Susan's book and read it. It did change the way I parent my college students. And I hope that you'll have that same experience. Thank you for writing it and all the work that you put into it. We have lots of ways for you to stay in touch with Susan. If you're interested in a book club opportunity, this is a great place to say that here on the pop-up.
And feel free to email me. I'm happy to pop in on anybody's book group via Zoom if you're not in Colorado. It's actually fun for me, to connect with people. So I love it.
It's awesome.
Oh my goodness. So I want to just talk briefly about the parent handbooks that Operation Parent puts out. I got them in the mail and I was just like, what is this? They really are wonderful. They're like a drill down, deep dive into these really specific topics that every parent needs to know. And so I do encourage you guys to check these out. They're really helpful. I think every school should have these as a free resource for their parents.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Susan. We know that these handbooks are life-saving, and we work really hard to keep them current on many of the tough parenting topics that you took us through today. Folks can find a bit about mental health, substance use, opioids, and much more in our parent handbooks. They're perfect for all caregivers, whether you're a parent, foster, kinship family, or grandparent. We're spotlighting the middle and high edition today because it gives practical conversation starters, action items, and updated facts on the things that are happening and how to appropriately communicate and talk them out with your children. You can click up here to learn. You can click on the pop-up here to learn more about our handbooks, which also include elementary, Spanish, and Christian editions. And today you can get free shipping on the handbooks. The holidays are just the most perfect time to lift up the people who help shape your child's world and you yourself. Getting or giving a parent handbook is a simple way to put prevention into the hands of those around you right away. Prevention is a gift. We live it every day. We believe that strongly, but we feel like you can help us keep folks informed and ready for the tough moments that come up when your kids are growing up and those tough conversations. So Nikki on our team works really hard to keep our handbooks current, and we feel like it would just be a great asset for you. It's affordable and it's the perfect stocking stuffer. We invite you to come back in January. It's going to be here before you know it, and join us on our January webinar where we're talking about a very tough topic, THC, hemp, and kratom. Julie Dryfault is incredible, and she's got a lot of information pulled together for you and sifted through a lot of the legislation and things that are happening now, and just how powerful and strong the products are that are out in reach of your youth today. And so hope that you'll join us and learn a little bit more in January. So take advantage of this quick pop-up and do that. So now a few more questions, which we love this part. This is awesome. Okay, so I did see right before we went up for those slides that we just covered, a grandparent was asking for some tips to help their 4 grandchildren manage screen time.
Well, you're a good grandparent just for even asking the question.
Yes, absolutely.
I think, when we ask kids, what they think is reasonable. Like, what do you think is a reasonable time? They often are harder on themselves. My 12-year-old, I said, how much time do you think you should have spending on that game? And she told me 12 minutes. I was like, I was going to give her 25 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
And
Yeah.
so I encourage you to sit down with your kids and collaborate with them. Ask them what they think the boundaries should be. How long do you think you should be on the screens? Now, the other piece of all that is really defining the screens, because there's a lot of screen hopping going on. And so I go from kids will go from their phone to their iPad to the TV, and really then they've ended up being on a screen all day. And so really helping them understand, like, okay, is it one movie and is it 10 minutes on the game? Really helping define that with them. And then maybe again, that jar with your grandkids of these are the things, the alternatives that we can do when we're not doing screen time.
Awesome. That's awesome advice. I know you touch on this and have some great insight for someone on the call who's asking, what do you recommend for broken homes or teens that are going back and forth between houses?
Yeah. So that is hard. Divorce can be hard on both the kids and the parents. And I know I'm going to say what's the best practice, but I know it's not always easy to do. The best practice is for the same rules and the same boundaries in both homes. And, if both parents actually read the Parenting Connection and ran their homes that way, about how can we foster belonging and connection? How can we communicate and volley with our kids? How can we allow them to be emotionally transparent? If they got both of those things in both homes, how incredible that would be. But I know that sometimes that's not always the case. And so really helping kids understand that, I know it can be hard, like empathizing with them that maybe the rules aren't exactly the same at each home, but I do have understanding around that. And, giving, again, your kids a voice to be able to voice what things they think are important in both homes.
It's so good. When you've had a child in your office that is going through that,
Yeah.
can you share with us what they verbalize as being the hardest part?
When kids are in,
Hard. It's all
yeah,
hard.
it's all, yeah, I think it is hard. Um, what is most damaging, whether parents are in the same home or in separate homes, is conflict. Conflict is what
Mhm.
is the most damaging. Putting kids in the middle, treating them somewhat like pawns, having to schedule through the kids, pass checks through kids, have kids read divorce documents. I've heard it all. And that's what I think is the hardest. If they didn't have that and the rules were like a little different and parents got along, then it won't be as hard if the rules are a little different. But I think it's when the conflict is there, when the parents don't communicate with each other and they communicate through the kids, that's what I think is the hardest on kids.
So hard. And then the family that they've known prior to that is no longer whole, which is so hard.
It's so hard.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of folks on the call that are working with families that are experiencing really tough stuff. This being one of them, and a caller is asking about tips for foster parents to up the connectedness, knowing that kids have gone through a lot of trauma and ACEs.
Yes, and I do talk about ACEs in the book. And actually, I've been wanting to do a pilot with foster care organizations with the book, because I think it can help foster care parents as well. foster care parents have to be more regulated than regular parents because we don't know what those children have been through. And so they have to show up and show up and show up because kids have had the experience of maybe a parent not showing up. Yeah. And so I think being a foster parent is very hard. And that you do have to be patient and really understanding that what that child is doing is a reaction from their previous situation, not what's happening maybe in your house. And I think that's really important because oftentimes we take, as parents or being in the caregiver role, we take things personally when it's really not about us.
There's a parent that gave a really good example of what you're talking about. They have 4 children. They were all formerly foster, but the youngest one is still experiencing really hard tantrums with screaming and stomping, and they're lasting for a very long time. And so the mom is trying to get some advice on how to rein in her getting triggered, which rightfully so.
Yeah.
So she just wanted some advice on how to kind of pull herself out of the trigger stage.
Yeah. Oh, you're asking me that question right now?
Yes, on behalf of the parents. Yeah.
I thought you were talking about a previous webinar.
That was a long-winded question, yes.
No worries. No worries.
And a very important one
yeah.
for the mom on the call, yes.
I think, and I don't want to minimize what's happening for you because I know, and I have been there. Again, I have my own 3 children, and there's so many times where my child would respond, and going back to my own family of origin, that response would have gotten a very different response. That would be that in parenting by fear type treatment. And so I know personally, and I'm not trying to minimize what's happening for you when you get triggered. But again, going back to that cycle of response and looking at the trigger and the physiological response. And that's where you need to stop and slow things down for yourself. And you are going to have to be your own coach in those moments, talking to yourself. This isn't about me. What can you do in that moment to help regulate yourself? Is that to take a little space, breathing. And in the book, I talk about 5-2-8 breathing. You breathe in for 5, you hold it for 2, and the exhale for 8. And the long exhale is what regulates your body. And again, I'm not trying to minimize, just go breathe at all, but coming up with some other things that are really specific to you that help you in those moments.
There's a single parent asking, she's widowed with 2 teen kids who mostly want to be on their games. So she's trying to go down the fine line of supporting the kids during a rough time in their lives, but also making some boundaries and setting up success opportunities for school.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry for your loss, first of all. And I hear what you're saying about this being a difficult time and trying to be understanding and allowing them maybe to use the screens more so than you normally would. And maybe there is a little bit of time where you have allowed that, and that's fine. But the fact is really they need they need connection with other people and talking to them about that we can have joy. I mean, we do get joy from using our screens, and our kids do, but that needs to be a very small percentage of our joy, a small percentage of our time. And so how else are they doing that? And really sitting down and again, having them write it up about what they think is reasonable amount of time to be on their screens. I have kids that come in here. I have heard anywhere from 3 hours to 12 hours on screens before. And it's really painful. And kids don't know how to stop themselves. A lot of them get to a point and then they're saying, I don't know how to back out of it.
Mhm.
So they do need support.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How about suggestions for coming alongside moms who are experiencing homelessness and also trying to support their kids?
Oh, goodness. That is a hard question. I used to work for Catholic Charities, and I did work down at the homeless shelter. And so those women need so much support. And that is such a big question. You know, we need a lot of governmental support around that as well. You know what? I mean, I think when we know that someone else is thinking about us, that someone else cares about us, that is such a gift. And so don't ever not realize how much just you caring can impact someone else. And so, really showing your care for this person and supporting her with the resources. I'm also happy to donate some books to wherever you are, whomever you are, just reach out to me. But knowing that, you know, you care, and I'm sure that you are tied into local resources there for the homeless,
Mm-hmm.
not just for the mother, but also for the children. I think they both, I mean, sometimes we just get resources for the kids and we don't think about the parent.
Absolutely.
Parent needs resources as well.
100%. And your influence on your child is the most important thing. Like you said, being there and caring is more so important. Um,
All right.
Here's one last one. Our final question, and I do apologize. We got more questions than we can get through today. We have hustled and done our best. But our closing question here is from a mom who has a 1-year-old and a 17-year-old, and finds herself getting avoidant when she's overstimulated. I just shut down. Do you have some thoughts for that mom?
I think the first thing, you know, you have a lot on your plate. And again, I can relate of having kids in very different ages. What's happening for you, my guess is that you get sandwiched where maybe you are doing things later at night with the 17-year-old, and then the 1-year-old, maybe you're up all night. And so I can understand why you are exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's about finding out when are these times that you feel like you're shutting down and what is happening around you when you're shutting down, to just get some clues as to, is it just pure exhaustion or is something else happening? Is there another pattern or cycle that's occurring that's causing you to shut down?
Powerful, Susan. You have shared so much with us during this 90 minutes that we've been together today. I just want to let parents know that you've got this. Operation and Parent and Susan have got you on your toughest days, and you are bringing yourself to the relationship with your child is a gift. It's a gift that will keep on giving through the year, and the prevention that you wrap around your family through the connection and conversations is going to be a huge protective factor. So I hope you've gotten a lot of ideas on how you might like that to unfold in your family today. I know that I sure have, and I've sure appreciated our time getting to know Susan and working with her. So we can't thank you enough for spending your afternoon with us, and we are already really looking forward to January and the next time that Susan might come back and join us. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, Operation Parent. Thank you all for joining us.
Yep. Goodbye, everyone.